Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk, here in the southeast corner of Scotland. And as everybody knows, Scotland is the capital of everything, whether those things are real or imagined. So Scotland is the capital of the globe. Scotland is also capital of the flat earth, just to make sure that those people are covered by our sheer dominance. My gosh, I cannot even keep that straight anymore. I hope everybody is doing well and has had a good first half of the week. We are coming towards the anus end of the month. So what does that mean, other than it's the back end of the month? Well, it means that we are coming up fast on the deadline for the 2024 Halloween Songwriting Challenge, which has its closing date of Sunday, October 27, 2024. So you need to get your entries in. If you have not joined yet, you need to join today. Otherwise, you are going to have very little time to complete your entry. But this is like no ordinary songwriting challenge that there has ever been before, because there are prizes up for grabs, courtesy of my very good friend and partner for this and other challenges, Rich Cresswell, who I don't think is here yet. But if he does come in and say hello, he is your point man for the challenge. So he has organized a workspace in my.personas.com. You do not have to be a member of Studio One Pro Plus to be able to join it. All you need is a free my.personas.com account. So if you are a Studio One user or you have Personas hardware, then you should have a my.personas.com account. And if you're not a Studio One person or you don't have any Personas hardware, you can just create a free account. It's not a bother at all. It does not cost you a penny, a cent, or a dime, or any other low monetary value coinage. You can get it for free, and then you will be able to join the workspace that we have made for this challenge. So it's going to be very, very cool. There are some resources in the workspace that will help you get creative. There are several different streams to this challenge this time. It's not just a songwriting challenge. It's also a mixing challenge. And it's also a remixing challenge. So if you're only a mixer and your strengths really aren't in composing or arranging, there's a remix challenge where you can actually take already composed stems and you can do your own thing with it. You can be creative with it. You can move things around. You can shuffle things around. You can add your own parts. You can do whatever you want to it, basically. And then you can submit that entry. And as I said, there are prizes. There's an S on the end there. There are multiple prizes, software and hardware prizes up for grabs. So if you're interested, then please do come and join us for this year's challenge. It's going to be very, very cool. Let's go see who was first in the door. And of course, it was Billy Morgan. Who else would be first in the door? So Billy's here. Kyle is here, being hilarious as usual. Kazmos is here as well. He says, hail from Ouija Land. Awesome, glad to have you here, mate. And we got Dwayne here as well. And we got Tony Stringer, we got Brett Marlowe, we got Roger Beckett, we've got Keith from Radio Talk Frumpet, we've got Mike Johnson over in the Philippines, my good grief, who is probably having his cornflakes as he watches this because he is Future Boy. He's like 12 hours ahead of United States Central Time Zone. So yeah, it's very early in the morning for him. But I'm glad you're here, mate. And who else do we have here? We have Chris Manrakna here as well. He says, good evening. I'm back partially. Well, I'm glad you're back partially, mate. I look forward to the day when you are back fully, but being back partially is just as good. And for right now, knowing that you're a busy guy right now, I will take that. So I'm glad you're here. We've got Paul Morgan here as well. And we got Just Bob here. And Mike says it is 7 o'clock in the morning. Yes, it is definitely kind of the beginning of breakfast time for you. But Mike, I'm glad you're here nonetheless. So I'm hoping that you are getting yourselves involved in the Halloween Songwriting Challenge. Whichever aspect of it that you're getting involved in. I'm really looking forward to hearing your entries. I have not listened to a single one, and I will not listen to a single one of them until after the closing, when Rich and I will go through all of the entries and we will listen and we will adjudicate and we will decide winners. So just by way of reminder to help me and Rich, if you are entering the songwriting category, then please make sure that you have labeled your entry as a songwriting entry. If you are entering a mixing only entry in that category, then please do make sure that you label it as such. And if you're just doing the remix, same, please do label it so that we know kind of which category you're entering, so we know what's what. That'd help us. And then it'd also help us basically to find it much easier to decide who our winners are going to be. Now, if you want to know when winners are going to be announced, winners are going to be announced on Wednesday, which would be our normal show. So next week's show, basically, on the 30th. So for you guys in the United States, that will be the evening before Halloween. For us here in the UK, it will be the dawn of Halloween. So that's going to be very cool. That's unlikely to ever happen again. Certainly not for a few years before that comes back round. So yeah, so that's kind of the story with that. So I hope you guys are all getting involved in it. I actually do have an entry. Which obviously I can't win, so, but I thought, hey, if you guys are doing the challenge, so am I. I'm going to do my part as well. Now, seeing as I know I can't win, I am going to break all the rules that we have set for this challenge. So for right now, the challenge is to use the Dorian Flat 5 scale, or mode, which is a bit of a weird sounding mode. So if we were to start this on G, it would be G, A, B flat, C, D flat, E natural, F, and the octave. So it's a little bit kind of exotic sounding. So it should be interesting to hear what you guys come up with, but you don't have to use that. You can use the regular Dorian scale. Now, the regular Dorian scale only has the one flat in it. It has the one black note in it, which is the B flat. So everything else is white. The difference is you've got that natural D instead of the flat 5, which gives you that nice tritone. So if you like tritones, and you think tritones are scary, then this might actually be a good option for you. There's been so many heavy rock songs that have been written that have the fifth to the flatted fifth. So, those are definitely options that you can pursue. So I'm because it's my contest. And I can't win because I can't win my own contest. I'm going to break the rules and I'm going to add a couple of other scales and modes to my entry, which should be interesting. But yes, you can use sound effects. So seeing as we now have Studio One Pro 7 and the Splice integration, go to town. Use the sounds that are in Splice if you want to. There are some, if you, by the way, if you have subscribed to Splice, then you'll find that there's a bunch of cinematic effects that you can use. I discovered this only last week. I was just like, oh, there's a whole bunch of things in there. There's sound effects, there's Foley, there's all sorts of stuff in there. There's spoken word. There's loads of stuff that you can grab, that you can bring into your song to add a little bit of drama and tension and terror. Because let's face it, the whole thing is the criteria, the success criteria for this contest is for me and Rich to have the shit scared out of us. So that's your challenge, is using the tools, the resources we've given you, the scale, scare the shit out of us. That's what we want. And the scariest scary thing will win, basically. Brett has a question. He says, do you prefer WAV, MP3, or any other file format? Don't know if you want them ready for YouTube or if you want to convert them to the appropriate files. So, either WAV or MP3 will do. Now, MP3 is going to be a smaller file size, so that will certainly help. But I know that there are some people who have actually made some videos. Not that that's actually part of the criteria. It's not going to get you extra brownie points if you've made a music video to go with your entry. But, you know, that's cool, an extra creativity, but it doesn't help win because your video is not being judged. What's being judged is the scariness and the use of all the kind of songwriting, composing, and arranging and orchestration concepts that I have been banging on about for the whole of this year, basically. So that's what these contests are designed to do. They're designed to give you a way of putting into practice the things that I'm talking about. So, you know, things like modes, things like 251s, things like inversions, things like, you know, counter melody and stuff like that. So that's what it's all about. And so that's what these provide. These provide an opportunity for you to be expressive and use the things that we talk about. Because I think if you kind of come to these shows and you just kind of passively imbibe information, just, you know, I don't think it necessarily helps and necessarily helps you grow and develop as a songwriter, as a composer, as an arranger, as an orchestrator. So that's what these contests are for. They're designed to give you an opportunity to do something creative with what we're talking about and what I'm teaching. So that you can, yes, okay, it gives you the chance to win something, but not all the challenges that we do have a prize attached to them. They're just an opportunity for you to try your hand at something specific that's got some specific elements to it. But yes, the Halloween ones, the Halloween challenges and the Christmas challenges tend to have some kind of prize going for them, but they won't always. So don't be kind of hanging your hat on, hey, there's going to be a prize. And that's kind of, you know, don't hang your hat on that because there's not necessarily always going to be a prize. It just, you know, it depends. You know, prizes cost money. And so, you know, there's that aspect of it as well. So I'm not going to always be able to front up for prizes. And, you know, I have very generous partners who have been very generous with this particular challenge and have been very generous with previous challenges, which is fantastic, which is great. And I love it. And I'm very, very thankful and very, very grateful to them for doing that. But I know that I'm not always going to be able to provide that. I'm not always going to have that. So please don't be kind of relying upon it because it's not always going to be available as a thing. Just Bob says, possible to play last year's top 3 before this year's top 3 before the night of reveal, possible as this and Sunday's show intros. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know, to be fair. I need to think about that. And also I need to, in all transparency and honesty, kind of think about what I did with all of last year's entries. I did actually put them in a folder. I just need to locate where I've put that folder. But yes, that's certainly a possibility. But you got to remember that the criteria for last time's was different to this one. So it was a different scale. It was the Locrian Natural 6, which was actually, personally for me, the Locrian Natural 6 was much harder to write using that scale. It was much harder. Because I was trying to be very strict to using the mode for creating my melody and creating my chords and creating my harmonies. And it was definitely hard. It was definitely tricky. So this one I don't think is quite so difficult, especially as we've kind of given you two possibilities. You can either use the Dorian flat 5 to give you that extra spice, or you can do the regular Dorian scale, which doesn't necessarily give you as much spice, so you're going to have to rely upon other elements to get that kind of fear factor going. So, Dorian mode I use all the time. So Dorian mode, from strictly, the harmony melody point of view, I'm going to find very easy to use. And the flat 5 is great because it's going to provide that little bit of extra tension, which is going to be very, very useful. So I'm definitely going to be making use of those. But like I said, I'm going to add in some extra scales as well to provide some extra tension, because what I'm planning on doing is going to have a lot of tension. And maybe not very much in the way of resolution of that tension. I might just leave that tension just hanging there in the air. Brett Muller says, worst case scenario is you capture the video from last year's stream. Yeah, I don't think I'll be doing that though. But yes, I will certainly see if I can find the last year's winners. Yeah, I'll talk to Rich about that. Rich and I will have a meeting time where he and I will sit down and we will be going through all of the entries. So I'm sure we'll talk about that, whether we should do that or not. So we'll see. Brett says, on Halloween, when I open the door, kids give me candy. Now that's cool. I wish the kids would do that for me. They don't. However, that said, last year, both my kids came back with buckets loads of sweets. And yes, they did give me one of their buckets loaded with sweets. And I said, that's fine. You can keep all the sweets. Just give me the chocolate, because I don't eat sweets. That's funny, Kyle. Kyle says, I smeared my Dorian scale with durian fruit. That's very funny. All right, so are there any other questions on the Halloween challenge in particular? Because we're kind of in the last few days now. I mean, we are into, Wednesday evening, so we've got Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then it's got to be done by 6 p.m. on Sunday. All right? That's your absolute cut-off point, is 6 p.m. Central Time on Sunday, 27th. All right? So when the show starts on Sunday, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll give you a wee bit more grace than that. The end of the show on Sunday is your cut-off, okay? So make sure you get your entry in by the end of the show on Sunday. All right? That's your final deadline. End of the show on Sunday. So please get your entries in for that if you want to be involved. Brett, actually, this is really smart. Brett says, improving one's skill set is the best prize of all. Yeah, that's wisdom. That's wisdom right there. It totally is. Whilst it's nice to get free gear, free plugins, free software, free hardware, free microphones or whatever, you know, whilst that's nice, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is improving your skills and improving what you do with the things that you learn. So we are rapidly moving towards the end of 2024. So we've got the Halloween challenge coming up. The end of that coming up. And I'm really, really excited about listening to all of your entries. And I'm really excited about choosing winners and celebrating that. That's going to be awesome. But I'm also thinking towards December. And I'm thinking towards the Christmas challenge. So I already have ideas and I already have thoughts on how that's going to work. I need to have some discussions with my partner in crime, Rich Cresswell, to decide how that's all going to work. But yeah, I'm really excited for what is to come for December. And then we will be into 2025. And I've got lots of very, very cool things planned for this channel for 2025. 2025 is going to be a big year for this channel. It's also going to be a big year for Personas as well. With, you know, kind of like the way things are changing, as was announced prior to the launch of Studio One Pro 7. So it's going to be big, 2025. It's going to be really big. Probably the biggest year that there has been in Personas world, basically. So I'm very excited about that. I'm probably actually more excited about that than I am about what we're going to be doing for the rest of this year. So the rest of this year, just to fill you in, we've got the Christmas challenge coming up. We've also got the Christmas show that we're going to do. And we've also got the Hogmanay show that we do every year as well. I will let you know when the Christmas special show is going to be. I'll let you know when that is. But the Hogmanay show will be at 7 p.m. on New Year's Eve. All right, so 7 p.m. Central Time, New Year's Eve. That's 1 a.m. UK, and that's going to be 2 a.m. Central Europe, and that's going to be just after lunchtime in Australia and New Zealand and that part of the world. So yeah, timing wise for Mike Johnson over in the Philippines is probably going to be better for him, because for him it will be like 8-9 o'clock in the morning. So he will already be in 2025. So yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Kane Rock is here. Hello. How are you, my friend? I'm glad you're here. So has anyone got any questions? Because we're coming up towards the halfway point of the show. So if you don't have any questions, or rather, if you do, keep typing away. Keep typing away. But whilst you're doing that, I'm going to talk a little bit about this mode, seeing as we're right at the end, and give you a few tips. So if you've not finished your piece yet, and you're still not sure how you're going to harmonize things, what chords can you build, I'm going to go over this a little bit, and provide you with a wee bit of demonstration. So, building chords out of scales is a little bit of a challenge. Now, if you play modal jazz or any kind of modal improvisational music, like, modal progressive rock, for example, then you're going to be familiar. You're going to have this down. You're going to be totally okay. Maybe the application, if you're not kind of doing something that's kind of rock orientated for your Halloween song, if you're doing something a little bit more orchestral, the application will be slightly different, but certainly what you actually do is going to be similar. So let's take, first of all, the Dorian scale, because that's going to be the easiest one to work with. As you can see, it's dead easy to play, because there's only the one black note. So it's incredibly easy to play. So if we're going to take that Dorian scale without the flat 5, and we'll just stick to simple triads for right now. So we've got G minor, obviously. Then we've got A minor, B flat, C major, D minor, then this pesky half diminished chord, or diminished chord, F major, and then G minor. All right, so those are your kind of little triads. But if we go for 4-note chords, like 7th chords, so we've got G minor 7, A minor 7, B flat major 7, C 7, D minor 7, E half diminished 7, F major 7, and then you're back. So you can use that kind of sense of major minor tonality that you would use in any kind of pop song. So you can totally do something like that. Is that scary? No, not really. So we need to find ways in which we can make that scary, because those are just regular sounds. So the way I treat a mode is not like finding regular chords. I want to find chords that are not normal. Okay, so how do I do that? Basically, instead of trying to find a regular major chord or a minor chord, throw that whole idea out the window. Bin it. Major minor chords, bin the whole idea. Instead, we're just going to pick notes out from the scale. And I want to try and avoid notes that suggest either a major or a minor chord. Okay? So this is where stacking fourths is really, really useful, because stacking fourths gives you this open sound that's neither major nor minor, but it has some darkness to it. So let's do that. So let's start with the G. And then let's add to that a fourth above. So count 4 notes up. So that's going to be a C. Let's count the next 4 notes up. So that's going to be the F. So we've got G, C, and F. Let's keep this as our bare bones kind of shape for this. And let's move this up through our Dorian scale. And we're going to be strict about this. So where necessary, I'm going to adjust this interval so it's not necessarily always going to be fourths. So we've got a stack of fourths on G. It works on A. As soon as I get to B flat, we get this kind of sound, because we've got a major 7th and we've got the tritone there. So this is kind of scary voicing. You can certainly have that. All right, then the next one. That does work. C, F, B flat. That does work. D, G, and C. And then the next one will work as well. Because that's E, A, and D. The next one doesn't, because you got that tritone again. So this one sounds quite dissonant. So does that one. So you've already got 2 kind of spiky, dissonant sounding chords that you can start with. And this is kind of what we want to go for. If we're going to kind of create lots of tension and lots of darkness, is find little clusters like that out of our scale. So I'm kind of sticking with this kind of fourths idea. But I'm also going to pick out some extra clusters as well that I might add onto the top of this. So that kind of works, but let's see, maybe we stick an A on the top. Let me just about stretch that. But I can also do this. And that's kind of like loaded with tension. Taking the second and the third and then the sixth and the seventh next to each other. Like that. And then we can do the same here. And then we can do the same here. So there's lots of little dissonant ideas that you can play with there just by picking notes out from the scale and moving them around. All right, so there's lots of different tense ideas that you can make use of. And then, of course, you can move these voicings. So you can make them either wide open or closed. For example, if I make this nice kind of close voicing a little bit wider. So let's put the A at the top here. And that sounds less dissonant. You know, it sounds a little bit less discordant when you kind of open up the voicings and you spread the notes out more. You don't really get that tension quite so much than if you play close up and you go for maximum crunch, you know. So you can compare. You can basically contrast. You can go for close-up voicings and then spread them out, you know. So there's lots of options there for creating tense kind of sounding chords. So what about melody? What can we do with the melody? Wide intervals is going to be your friend here if you want to get that kind of scary kind of effect. So don't necessarily go for, you know, I mean, that's too bluesy. We don't want blues here because blues is not scary. It's, you know, it's blues, man. It's sad. It's depressing, but it's not scary. We want scary. We want terror. So, you know. Repetition as well. Lots of repetition. And this is again where if you listen to horror film scores, you will find that there's a lot of repetition. In fact, one of the key components of a good horror score is minimalism. What's minimalism? Minimalism is a compositional style all of its own. And the idea of minimalism is to basically pair, strip things back to bare bones basics and create something that they call a cell. So you can have a rhythmic cell, which is maybe one short little rhythmic figure. And then you can have a melodic cell. A melodic cell may just have 4 notes in it or 3 notes in it. And then you repeat those. So you might have a particular rhythmic figure, and that's like cell A. And then you use that, you repeat that. And then you might have another cell, which is maybe that cell but backwards. And you call that rhythmic cell B. And then you do the same with melody. You have your cell 1 for melody, which may be 3 or 4 notes long. And then cell B is the contrast of that by you reverse it. You do it backwards. And then a natural variation of something that you do backwards is going to be something that you do, you don't just reverse it, but you turn it upside down. So how do we do that? Okay, so how do we turn a melody upside down? So if the melody is going up in pitch, like this, the obvious way to play it backwards is just to go. So we're going up, we're going down. It's the same thing backwards. So that's going forwards and then going in retrograde. So what's retrograde? Retrograde is to turn it upside down. So instead of just going up and down in pitch, you flip the rhythmic cell. So you turn the rhythm upside down as well. So it's not just backwards, but it's upside down. So if the pitch of your cell, let's say you go, that's your cell. And you're repeating that. Well, the backwards of that is going to be, okay. So the backwards and upside down of that is to invert the direction of pitch as well as playing the rhythmic cell backwards. So if you've got as your backwards, so now what you have to do is you have to reverse those pitches. So we're going low, high, middle, low, high, middle. So now you have to go, but you have to do the same rhythm. So that is retrograde inversion. So it's backwards and flipped. Okay? And so these are examples of things that you can do. Whoops, smacking the mic. So you create a short rhythmic cell, maybe has, 2 or 3 notes, like, which is what I just demonstrated, or something like that, or so maybe it has 3 notes, maybe it has 4 notes. That's got 4 notes in it. So how do you reverse that? So we've got 1, 2, and 3. So this time we go, all right, so that's forwards and backwards. And then the pitches, you then go either going up, going down, or invert the direction that the pitches go in. And that gives you your rhythmic cell and your melodic cell and their natural variations. And then your other variation is going to be which instrument's playing it. So if you've got a flute that's playing the main melody cell, and then you've got a clarinet playing variation B, and then which would be the backwards, and then you've got, say, an oboe playing the retrograde inversion, then you swap instruments around, or you introduce a new instrument, and then you just repeat these things. So these things will just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, kind of like looping, kind of like using the launcher, except the thing with the launcher that you can't do at the moment is have it go backwards. But you can have it going forwards. You can't have it going backwards. That would be far too cool. If you could have like one going forward and one going backwards, that would be amazing. But that's not gonna be a thing at the moment, because at the moment Studio One is a linear DAW and the launcher concept is non-linear. So there's kind of a bit of jiggery pokery being done by the geniuses at Persona Software to kind of make the launcher work, because it's not linear and Studio One is linear. So that's kind of, there's a little bit of magic going on. So it would be incredible if they could work out a way to, have it go backwards and then forwards at the same time. That would be something else. But yes, so that's kind of where, tools like the launcher are going to be really, really useful. I mean, what you can do is you can record your cell on the track rather than in the launcher, and then use the reverse tool in Studio One to basically reverse the audio, and then you can drag and drop that into a cell, into a scene. So you could have a scene that is forwards, then you could have a scene that is retrograde, you could have a scene that is retrograde inverted, and then you can play different ones from different scenes, and then sculpt a playlist based out of those. And that would be one way to do it. If you're going to go completely down that minimalist route. Minimalism is really, really cool for horror. It gets used an awful lot. The scenes in Psycho, for example, there are the famous shower scene where the lassie in the shower gets stabbed, and John Williams' famous kind of strings thing. Genius, absolute genius. But that's kind of perfect. And then the music for the film The Birds is another very, very fine example of use of minimalism in film music in particular to create a very, very suspenseful atmosphere. Because, we all know that Hitchcock was the master of suspense. Yes, you can do that kind of thing in Sample 1, for sure. Yeah, you can play samples forwards and backwards. And then, of course, you want to be able to record the output of that. So yeah, Hitchcock was the ultimate master of suspense when it came to cinema. But his movies would suck if it wasn't for the music. And so that's where minimalism really kind of comes to the fore. So if you want to check out good minimalist music, that would be a good place to go. Another composer I can recommend is Steve Reich. He writes minimalist music. He writes ingenious minimalist music. Philip Glass is another minimalist composer who is definitely very well worth checking out if you're kind of stuck for inspiration on how to do that. Kind of how does this music work? The music of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop as well, who basically are the workshop that came up with the Doctor Who theme. In fact, I forget the lady's name who actually composed that theme tune using synthesizers and tape loops and stuff like that. On a shoestring budget, no less. She had hardly any money to do what she did, but she created not only the theme tune for Doctor Who in the early days, but also a lot of the great incidental music as well from the classic, 1970s, 1980s Doctor Who series. Go check those out, because the music that she did was incredible on the low budget that she had. Remarkable. And very, very, very suspenseful. So if you're after music that's scary, that is suspenseful, then those are the people that I recommend checking out. John Williams has done some great work on that. Wendy Carlos, I'm not sure. It might be. You might be right, Brett. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, maybe, Bob. I'm not sure. That's possibly more kind of a little bit of sound design. But yes, you can certainly use string instruments like cellos, like basses and stuff like that to create some very, very cool sound effects. One of the things I did way, way, way back like in the 1990s. I was in fact working on my first film as a musician in the English Session Orchestra, and we were doing the score for a film called A Fistful of Fingers, which was basically a spoof Western movie shot down in the southwest of England. That was kind of the joke. It was Edgar Wright's first film. Edgar Wright, who went on to make Hot Fuzz and that other film with Simon Pegg. Darn it, what was that called? I can't remember the name of that film. I hate it when this happens. The first film was that film, and then they did Hot Fuzz. But yeah, that's the Edgar Wright I'm talking about. So I was working on his very first film, and that film was done on a very, very, very tiny budget. So tiny, in fact, that the orchestra, after we had done the orchestral stuff, all the cues and everything, a number of us stayed behind to do sound effects. Shaun of the Dead, thank you. A number of us stayed behind to do sound effects. I was one of them, and two of the other percussionists so there's like three of us. We stayed behind to do some sound effects. I did a lot of sound effects vocally with my mouth because I'm good at doing vocal sound effects. You know, things like doors opening, doors closing. I can do those for days. So I did a whole bunch of those. And we did some glass breaking. That was fun. We did some horse sound effects, horse hoof sound effects. But one of the things I had to do was I had to come up with this particular sound. I'm trying to remember what the scene was. But anyway, I needed a long kind of scraping sound with a thunk at the end of it. And we tried all sorts of different ways to try and do it. But we couldn't figure it out. We couldn't figure out what way to do it. And then I picked up one of the upright basses that had been hired for doing the scoring. And it was still there, waiting for the second day. Basically, everybody left their instruments around. So I got one of the upright basses, and I got a mute. And these mutes, you get them. They're called jazz mutes. You get them on violins. You get them on violas. But you also get them on basses as well. If you need the sound of the bass to be softer, or the violin to be softer, then you have this mute, and it basically sits on top of the strings and just applies just a tiny little bit of downward pressure. Not a lot, just a tiny little bit. And so I got one of these mutes, and I put it right up at the top near the headstock of the instrument. And then with the bow, I tapped it, and it slid down the string until it hit the bridge. And when it hit the bridge, it made this thunk sound. But all the way down the string, it just went, and then it hit the string, and it was perfect for what they wanted. They said, "Oh, that's it. That's the sound. That's what I had in my mind. That's great." So I recorded like 5 or 6 different versions of that. So yes. Absolutely, string instruments can be used to make all sorts of weird and wonderful sounds. I bowed cymbals with a bass bow. I bowed a wine glass. That was fun because if you do it too fast or you apply too much pressure, the glass will shatter. But if you kind of just apply just enough, you can make it sing. Kind of a little bit like, when you damp your finger and you run your finger around the rim, using friction, you can make the glass sing. Well, I did that with a bow, just on the edge of the glass, and you have to be careful that you don't make the glass shatter. But so yeah, so you can certainly use stringed instruments for making lots of weird and wacky sounds. So yeah. Not sure if the cello used actual notes, just a heck of a cool sound. Probably more sound design for sure. Yeah, I think it probably was. But But yeah, so if you want to use that kind of sound design in your song, go for it, for sure. I'm going to use all sorts of weird and wonderful shit for my song, no question. But yeah, one weird, totally weird sound is if you take a gong that's like being held up by a piece of string. You're holding the string of the gong, and you have a big basin of water, and you bow the gong whilst you're lowering the gong into the water. It makes the weirdest sound you have ever heard, but it's the coolest sound you've ever heard. It's very, very cool. And then you just basically keep lowering and raising the gong in the bowl of water whilst bowing it, trying to make sure you use consistent pressure and consistent duration with the bow whilst you're doing it, so you get a consistent tone. That is a weird sound, but it's so cool. And I still have a bunch of samples of those somewhere on one of my external hard drives. Anyway, we are pretty much there at the end of the show because I don't see any other questions. So I hope you guys are. Dominic Glynn is credited with writing the Doctor Who theme. Okay, I thought it was a lassie. I've forgotten her name. I've forgotten the lassie's name, but she was basically she ran the BBC Radiophonic workshop. That was her thing. She was basically commissioned by the BBC to do that. I can't remember her name, unfortunately. All right, so that is the end of the show, folks. Thanks very much for joining us. We peaked at just about 25, I think. Yes, we did. We peaked at 25, which is 3 short of the record for a Songwriting Simplified. I can't really count the ones that we had for the Studio One Pro 7 release because that was kind of different. That was kind of Studio One 7. They weren't really proper Songwriting Simplified shows, so I can't really count those. As much as I really want to, I can't. So, thanks very much for joining me. I will see you guys all on Sunday for Sunday Night Live, 6 p.m. Central. It'll be the deadline for your for the Halloween challenge, and then on Wednesday, so next week, be here next week. We will announce the results, and you'll find out who's won and what you've won. And then when you know that you've won, you need to contact Rich directly, and he will tell you. He'll give you instructions on how you claim your prize. So other than that, folks, I'm going to wish everybody a very, very good evening, and I will see you all on Sunday. Have a good one, folks. Good night.